And Vanessa, what's been going on with Iran?
Interesting developments. Of course, we saw at the end of Marwa's video that she said that one of the tactics of the resistance factions in Lebanon would be to reach out to their allies in the region. And I just wanted to include this article written by a new writer for UK column, very much from the region, Ibrahim Majid, who's writing about on a bi-weekly basis on the situation in the region, talking about the regional disarmament of any forces, whether resistance or actual military, that may present a threat to Israel now or in the next century, basically. So there is a concerted effort by Israel to wipe out any potential threat to the security of Israel during its expansionist program. So basically what we've seen is the Iran security chief has been visiting both Iraq and Lebanon. He was in Baghdad for talks on the next phase of the resistance axis. And this is because there are moves by Washington and Israel also to disarm what is perceived to be the resistance factions in Iraq itself. Noor al-Maliki, the former prime minister of Iraq, put out a very strong statement saying that we agreed in the meeting with Lajarani that Iran and Iraq would refuse to disarm Hezbollah or the Popular Mobilization Forces in Iraq. Of course, the PMF does come under the governance of the Iraqi military. He also said, had it not been for the PMF, of course, the Americans would have swallowed Iraq. And the same could be said if Hezbollah is eradicated in Lebanon. Now, in Lebanon, as a result of some of the statements from the Iranian foreign minister and other diplomats, members of the opposition to the resistance, in other words, those that are aligned with Israel, like Jamail, demands the expulsion of the Iranian ambassador, says Tehran's guardianship is over, which is kind of extraordinary, as they're accepting diktats from Israel, Washington, and Saudi Arabia. So there's a little bit of hypocrisy, to put it mildly, there. And then let's say what Ali Lajarani said, the new security chief from Iran, when he was in Lebanon. He was diplomatically very blunt. So he said Lebanon should be strong and independent, not take orders from across the oceans. Those who interfere in Lebanon's affairs are imposing plans and deadlines. And he's absolutely correct on this, because the deadlines for the resistance disarmament is, of course, coming from Israel and Washington, not necessarily from the Lebanese government. He also went on to say, in coordination with President Aoun of Lebanon, Iran wishes to strengthen its relations with the Lebanese state and people at all levels. So he's making a very clear point here. I commend President Aoun, sorry, I misspelled that, or it was spell checked wrongly, for reinforcing national unity and unifying ranks within all Lebanese sects. So while this is a very diplomatic message, I think it's palpably clear. And the head of Hezbollah has also made a very clear statement yesterday on the fact that Hezbollah will resist disarmament with everything they possibly can. Sorry, just another mention of Syria-centric regional analysis, which is going to be a new section on UK column covering analysis on the region and focusing very much on the whole of West Asia. But I wanted to today look at what's been going on in Syria. There's a recent article that was published yesterday at UK column by myself. Syria prey to the globalist cabal and crony capitalist al-Qaeda regime. Effectively, what we're seeing now in Syria is very much what happened in Iraq and, of course, elsewhere. It's standard procedure after US, UK-led disintegration of a country and destruction of its sovereignty. We're seeing crony capitalism come to the fore. The supply or what we've been seeing since May through July and August are the creations of memorandums of understandings with companies that I demonstrate in the article to be very shady, many of them front companies or shell companies, without the financial wherewithal to actually follow through on the pledges. So, of course, what we're actually seeing is the attempt to bring money in through corruption and crony capitalism into Syria, which is going to line the pockets of Washington, their elected regime, which at the moment is the al-Qaeda corrupt regime that has for years been siphoning off both gold and finances and wealth from inside Syria, even when it only contained or controlled Idlib. Now, of course, it's being done on a much larger scale. So I just want to go into some depth. It's all in the article. People can go and read that. But just some examples from what has been going on, the companies involved. So if I could just have the slide after this one, if possible. These are a couple of the companies. So the memorandums of understandings and some of the dodgier companies that were involved. So from the UAE, 2 billion apparently has been invested in the Damascus metro, 26.5 kilometers, 17 stations. One wonders why right now that people have no electricity, no water, are they being expected to celebrate the creation of an underground metro. Jordan, 17 million for a luxury hotel complex in Deir ez-Zor. Aleppo, 25 million for a commercial complex. Ubaco, a company from Italy, that has pledged 2.5 billion for Damascus Towers project, and Polydef recycling and sustainability project. Now, just leave that on the screen for a second, if you can, Mike, because I particularly wanted to point out, so the Damascus Towers project, which is the 2.5 billion, so that's 20,000 apartments, 25 floors each, 60 towers. Now, the company, Ubaco, which is based in Italy, was founded in April 2022 with a capital of 16,000 euros and an annual revenue of 209,000. So clearly not capable of fulfilling that pledge. And then if we look at Polydef, 2021, it was a hardware company, which was dissolved 2 years ago. On the 25th of July, it re-established itself, claiming to be specialized in aviation. Now, all of these companies are, of course, going to need external financing, which is where this familiar money laundering is going to come in. And I wanted to mention at the same time that while all of this is going on, this grotesque spectacle that Jolani and Tombarak are providing for the Syrian people, of course. Yesterday, I met with refugees from Suwaida. Again, I've written extensively about that for UK Column and reported on it. The massacre led by Jolani's HTS forces and his tribal faction proxies. I met with a number of refugees, Venezuelan Druze, that have been effectively evacuated by the Venezuela embassy here, brought to Lebanon. And so while Jolani, Tombarak, Washington, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey are providing this absolutely fraudulent spectacle of some kind of investment into a dying sovereign Syria that is going to be debt enslaved, the stories I heard of Jolani's forces were horrific and reminiscent, of course, those that I heard back in 2012, 2013. For example, children were seen to be carried out of their houses, including babies. They prepared boiling water. The children were murdered by putting them into the boiling water. Children were slaughtered in front of their parents if the parents didn't have the money to pay HTS. Women were abducted or raped on the spot and then murdered. The desecration of properties, of tombs, of shrines, of entire villages that were razed to the ground. So while all of this is ongoing, this unbelievable theater of bloodshed is being conducted by Washington and the UK. We can't forget that the MI6 linked operatives are in the presidential palace grooming Jolani's administration to change their image for the public. Meanwhile, the bloodshed continues in Syria. People have no money. They're living through the most desperate poverty that they've ever seen. And corruption now is within a shadow state. There is no accountability whatsoever for Jolani's regime. And of course, they're siphoning out the wealth because they know that they're not going to be permanent. So Syria is effectively being raped and pillaged on every single level.
Vanessa, I can't say thank you for that report because that was quite harrowing in many ways. But I'd just like to address something that was being said in the chat box there while you were speaking, and that was that somebody was saying Well, this is international news. This is not British. It's the UK column. Why aren't you covering more British stuff? And my point, Vanessa, is I'd be interested in your thoughts on this. This is British news because these are puppets of the British regime. And therefore, this is our responsibility, in my opinion. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Well, I find it rather depressing that someone from Britain is saying, well, this isn't British news, when the British regime is responsible for what is now happening in the region, and has been responsible for more than a century. So I think we need to wake up to the fact that our regime in Britain is utterly responsible for the bloodshed that is now happening. And that bloodshed is not going to be contained in Syria, because the British are sponsoring the Takfiri elements that are conducting these atrocities against the Syrian people. And where are these Takfiris going to go in the end? Where are they going to go? They're going to come back to the UK, to the EU, to the US, and you'll be facing them. So it is a British problem.
Yes, yes. I mean, I don't think it was a suggestion that it wasn't. Well, anyway, we'll talk about more in extra because that is a really interesting and important point to make. So thanks for the comment because it's going to start an interesting conversation. But anyway, let's finish off today. Coming back to Mark then, and Mark, some health related news.